Welcome back to the channel, lads and ladies, and welcome to a replay sent in by Paul, Do Not Even Try Gama, who is, well, besides being a horrible driver, apparently, I guess he just wasn't watching where he was going. But this is a video sent in by Paul, who is famous, or infamous, if you will, for his affection for the Sherman tank. It's interesting. That's always a topic worth discussing until it becomes annoying to hear people continue and continue and continue to discuss it. Not that I'm accusing Paul of that kind of behavior. I'm also not accusing him either. There are none found guilty or innocent in Toshio Thunder, only replayable, if you will. Spotting a T-34, I believe, around the corner, bounces a shot as he pushes forward aggressively, puts one into the side of the turret ring of the T-34, the APHE of the M10 Wolverine tank destroyer, taking down the entire crew. Paul was not guaranteed to bounce that shot, but he pushed forward aggressively, and a few things that I noticed in this replay is, and no offense intended here whatsoever, this reminds me of the way I used to play the game about a year ago. And I find myself using the strategies you see Paul using here occasionally, even to this day. If you listen off to his right, an allied tank in the air, an aircraft, and the M10 needs to know, friend or foe. Look at the beautiful gun depression. Oh, as he backs away from this one and lets the T-34 take a revenge shot from an ally. Look at that beautiful gun depression as Paul gets his cannon on target with not quite enough time to secure the kill from that ally who assisted him there. Gets shot in the side by another T-34. And the first lesson of this match: there's always another T-34. So if you don't want to get shot in the side, do not be the first person in the battle line. The M10, a reasonably good long-range vehicle. Actually, it excels at its battle rating at long-range engagements. I think it sits at a 3.7 in the American tree, rank 2, with over 100 millimeters of penetration on the main gun. More than enough to deal with T-34s and Panzer IV F2s if you play your cards right. Decent sloped armor on the front, poor sloped armor on the sides, and a turret that has a surprisingly punishing mantlet sometimes. Between the hit detection and the current state of War Thunder as of the making of this video, and the angling and layering available on the front of the M10, it can sometimes protect itself from damage. Other times, it bounces down into the shot trap below the whole front, below the turret front, so that is something to keep in mind. What am I saying here? The M10 is good at long range. It's good on a hill. It's not good whenever it needs to turn its turret, as it has that poor turret rotation speed, not the best whole rotation either, just enough mobility to get itself into trouble, as you see Paul quickly coming back up to where he was. And all of that is to say, no offense, but I think Paul is using the M10 wrong here. Look how long it takes to get the gun on target, but sometimes, if you play your cards just right, even if you're using a hammer to turn a screw, if you get lucky and all you have is a hammer, things start looking like nails. So now Paul trying a little bit different strategy. Originally he was spearheading, now he has gotten to the front and he's flanking, which is a little bit better strategy for the M10. Now, not every map are you going to be able to set up in a defensive position, get that gun depression, and fire on targets as they're on the move. That really is the best strategy with the M10. Everything else is using it wrong, but like I said, you don't always have the chance to use it properly. Dedicated to taking out the Wolverine here. Maybe he's spading it, maybe he just loves the thing. There is a lot to love about this tank destroyer. And look how long it takes that gun to get back on target. You have to basically pretend this thing doesn't have a turret unless you're in a ready position to counterattack. The army training video on the M10 says that it has a turret that even your sister could operate. It's a nice little casual sexism, but or misogyny maybe, as Paul survives a shot from, what is that, Italian boy? Poor Italian boy. You are getting derped. A second shot goes into the mantlet. No problems for Paul and his crew. That Italian tank just didn't have the penetration power to deal with an M10, and that's an issue you run into with the lower rank Italian tanks. That tank, though, was trying to fight far above its own battle rating, and he really should have pushed aggressively there against the M10 after Paul didn't kill him with that first shot, but instead he tried to back out of combat, just showing that that opponent was probably not ready to face an M10. And why do you want to flank around an M10? Sorry if I seem a little bit negative here, but I'm trying to teach, and this is me teaching myself from a year ago. I don't know how long Paul has been playing ground forces, and you know, like I said, these are lessons that I've had to learn myself, and you just learn by seeing, or you learn by doing. And here we saw that lower rank Italian vehicle. The only thing he had on the M10 in that close range encounter was surprise and mobility. He took his shot, and that's how Paul found out where he was. His shot didn't cripple the M10 at all, and so that's the time when you start to panic, and you can panic forward or you can panic backward. The right call, again, would have been to press the M10 and get around to its side. It doesn't have the gun traverse or the hull traverse to engage a light tank in a turning engagement, to put it that way. And it definitely doesn't have the side armor to absorb shots the way its front armor sometimes can. And again, I use the word sometimes here because with a total of 40 millimeters, even though it's sloped fairly well, the frontal sheet of the M10 is not perfect. Nice side turret shot on the KV as he starts to experience what an M10 commonly experiences, fire from the air. And just getting lucky as he has flanked the enemy position. He gets a nice kill on that Panzer IV, what is that, a Panzer IV-H, Panzer IV-G, something along that line. So we'll call it a Panzer IV Skirtzen. Mr. Skirtzen, yeah! Anyway, enough skirting the issue. Paul is now doing fairly well. He's having success. Some of his encounters, he started off on the back foot, as it were, but the strength of the M10 as a tank destroyer chassis has come through for him. You definitely don't want to be trading shots with the enemy, but if you have to, there are worse vehicles to be in than the M10, and he's been able to make the main gun work, which is something that the main gun on the M10 commonly does for you. Now, another target. Starting off with the MG mounted turret side and finishing off with the powerful main gun. Looking for more targets. Another thing that I like to note as Paul lines up the shot here is you don't want to stay in your gunner view for too long. It's nice to build a habit of popping out of gunner view to check your surroundings while you're reloading. That enemy tank is going to stay there. And again, this is advice to me. A second shot, that one aimed too far forward on the flat Panzer, fails to go through, but with a little bit of help from his friends, Colonel Paul, DoNotEvenTry, manages to get that sweet victory. So we're seeing a bit of good positioning here when it comes to flanking the enemy. We're seeing a good dose of luck when it comes to bouncing shots and having the support from his teammates when he needs it, and those tend to be things that line up for the better matches. Paul had a good time here. He was excited about this one, and I was too. It's really great to see an M10 doing well. There was one replay quite a while ago where I had a very long intro to it. Who was it that sent that one in? He was getting absolutely, he was going on a rampage in the M10, and it was fantastic to see. And the best way to play the Wolverine, again, is, as with most tanks, you want to be the first one to fire, and generally you can turn that first shot into a killing blow if you know where to aim and you have a good feel for the gun on the M10. Facing a whirlwind, there's not much the M10 has to worry about. The frontal armor is enough to protect from most rounds from that foe, as Paul doesn't even have to worry. He gets to return the favor to that Sherman, backing him up the way Paul's team has backed him up a few times during this match. And now he's on a rampage with a good number of kills under his belt and continuing to position himself. If you listen around, you might not be able to hear this depending upon the settings I've been using, but I keep on mentioning to listen. You can hear allied tanks. You can often detect an enemy if they're within, say, 100 or 200 meters of you, even if they're around the corner. And if you've ever wondered, why did that guy know where I was? You see, we saw that KV. But that KV also noticed Paul, and I'm not sure he had direct line of sight on him. I suspect that he may have heard Paul coming. So take that as a lesson. Once again, the armor comes through for Paul here, but if the KV had managed to aim just a little bit more successfully, that would have been the end of our man. Now, going into a little bit of a cinematic view to take a look at where that round hit. Honestly, kind of surprised it didn't go through, but the KV does lack penetration on its main gun, which it more than makes up for in the form of its very sturdy armor. Not something it was able to use against Paul in this situation, but if you're broadside, you're broadside. Not a lot you can do in the few seconds after you've noticed the enemy. So, I guess that's just a long-winded way of me saying, listen to the game. If you want to do well, you want to get 2 or 3 more kills than you normally would in a match, you want to improve your performance in ground forces and air forces, you got to keep your ears on. As Paul gets taken down by a foe he probably wouldn't have noticed if he was listening closely to the game. Sometimes there's just another tank. In fact, there's always another tank somewhere, isn't there? Paul, now coming back into the battlefield, engages what looks like, it looks similar to a P-40. Is that, I thought it was one of the early Italian monoplanes. Turns out it's one of the early French monoplanes, which means the same thing. It's gonna outturn a Hellcat. So Paul here in a serious disadvantage, using the last of his energy to turn aggressively in the Hellcat, and this is a big mistake in my humble opinion. He goes into the vertical, pops his flaps, he's really draining energy here, and his enemy is starting to turn inside him. Now at this point exactly is when I would duck down to the deck and try and zoom away. It would give that French boy some time to get his guns on target, but look now, as they go into the stall, the French aircraft definitely has the maneuvering advantage, as his aircraft is much lighter. This would be, just in a few seconds ago there, a decent chance to exit from the combat, and I'm thinking, Paul, you gotta get out of there, man, you gotta zoom away. I've been playing a lot of jets, I've been playing a lot of Salamander in Tank RB, and in the HE-162, exiting turning engagements is the rule. We do not turn with the enemy. You turn once to get your guns on target, you never turn more than 180 degrees, and even after about a 90-degree turn, you need to be careful about how you accomplish that and how you get your energy back. Now also a good time to exit the combat, but Paul, dedicated here, goes into the vertical with the enemy behind him. This is how you die. He's presenting a huge target. The enemy's got tons of energy. He's firing and gets some damage with his DACAs. Is it enough? Yes it is, as the pilot snipe claims Paul in the end. and that Frenchy boy flies off to victory for once. I thought I'd include that one in the video, even though Paul didn't really accomplish a lot in the air there. I felt like it was a good lesson. I didn't properly identify that enemy aircraft. I thought it was Italian the first time I watched the replay. It is a French monoplane, but as soon as you see that they're starting to outturn you and starting to win in the stall fight, which is what Paul was engaging in there, and he was doing a good job of stall fighting in the Hellcat. The problem is he shouldn't have been doing that. So as soon as you start to see that you're at a disadvantage, it's time to change your strategy. If they're turning inside you, if they're beating you in the stall, your only option that can see you survive is to get out of there. Make some distance, get your nose down, pick up as much speed as you can, watch your tail when he fires, do your evasive maneuvers. You can judge in that split second if you have about 200 meters or more between you. You can judge where he's aiming and just dip out of the way if his bullets are going to hit you. It's not a good strategy. It's just the only strategy that really has a chance to work. It's not a great situation. And also, you saw that he entered the battlefield with bombs and rockets on his plane. And one of the things, especially at low tier, that I recommend is if you're flying an American fighter with those 50 cals and you hear enemy aircraft in the air when you die, when you go to spawn in, and I'm not sure, I think we did hear those enemy aircraft though before he died. This is part of map awareness, and this is my final lesson. I really want to make a video on how to get to the next level in Tank RB. And my last tip for you is be aware of enemy aircraft in the sky. If there's one or two enemy fighters, maybe skip carrying your ordnance, which is going to increase your spawn point cost anyway. And especially at low tier with those 50 cals, you can still punch through the roof armor of almost everything you face, with the notable exception of the KVs. But whatever, screw those guys. Let somebody else shoot them. And without your ordnance on, you'll be able to climb. He could have boom and zoom to that enemy aircraft, which is definitely the preferred method, if he had climbed toward the battlefield and if he had not spawned in with his ordnance. So these are all ways that you can look back on a match and go, how can I improve? And Paul had a great match here, high five, and he has a chance to get even better at the game of War Thunder. Anyway, guys, thanks for showing me your replays. Feel free to send those in. I won't always put you up in front of the class and go, this is how to be better. But I know Paul, and he's a great guy, and so I hope he'll forgive me for using him as an example of both the good, the bad, and for a third, maybe the ugly of War Thunder as well. Catch you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.